Where you checking in from?
Hi, Jeannie. It just kicked us off. Like, it just ended. I'm like, what the heck?
I was like, yeah, they didn't like my electoral college
I
stuff.
was like, go in, girl.
So you were talking about the electors.
Yeah, I mean,
electors.
Long story short, the way that our current process is set up is that there are certain swing states that
Talk about
carry
that.
carry more weight in terms of voting than other states. And this is because these are states where you don't need a majority to get all of the electoral college votes.
Right.
So in states like Florida, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, those 6 states, they were won by a very slim margin. And Donald Trump won all of those states, and he had about, like, not a majority. So he didn't have 50+1 in any of those states. And yet the way that the electoral college is set up, as long as you have a plurality, meaning you have the most number of votes, you take all of those electoral college votes. So because there are third-party candidates, in 2016 we had Jill Stein, we had Gary Johnson. It makes it harder for any one candidate to have 50+ votes, 50+1 votes. But what that means is that you can very well win a state without having gotten the majority of that vote in that state. And that's a problem, right? And it's why, in Arizona, Donald Trump won that state by less than 100,000 votes. In Florida, I said it's 112,000 votes. In Wisconsin, Hillary Clinton lost by 22,000 votes. These are slim margins.
Right.
And I would love to have a whole conversation about electoral college reform. But I think what's really important to discuss today is what this means for the Latino community, where we literally are the margin of victory in these states. So I'll give you Arizona. I said that Arizona was determined by less than 100,000 votes. There were over 600,000 Latinos that had the ability to vote and did not. So those are 600,000 Latino voters that we left on the table. Either in Arizona.
If you guys are here, if you're listening to this and you're listening to Mayra, we do not have the luxury of sitting out and not going to the polls, because it literally it makes the difference. One vote, and you could be that one vote. And if we have 600,000 of those votes,
and it was determined by a sixth of that.
Right. Wow. Right.
So, we have the numbers, right? Latinos have the numbers this election cycle, regardless of who you are supporting.
Exactly.
We have the numbers to make our voice heard as a collective. Right. And I want to share an alarming statistic with y'all, because part of the issue, and I say we left votes on the table because I don't want to blame Latinos for not voting when we don't get asked, right? And so what Latino Victory does is we're making sure that we're pushing campaigns and candidates to make sure that they're engaging our community, because you can't expect us to go out and vote if you don't ask for a vote. It's a matter of respect. How do you expect someone to go do something if you don't ask them?
Right.
And so
do you think that the candidates do a good job at soliciting the Latino votes? Because I don't know if they're really out here speaking to us and to the issues that are important to us. I mean, I think we see it at the tail end, right? The closer we get to an election, the more now we start hearing about the things we want to hear.
Yeah.
How can politicians do a better job at engaging with our communities?
Yeah. So one, I think that we need more consistent and early engagement from all sides of the aisle. But I do think that, organizations like Latino Victory have been sounding the alarm and pushing our candidates, and the candidates that we work with are starting earlier than ever to engage our community. But we can always do better. You know, at the end of 2018, there were 40% of Latinos who were surveyed and said that they had never been contacted by a candidate, a party, or a campaign. So that's 40% of voters who turned out to vote but had never heard from anyone.
Right.
And that's a problem. And very recently, Naleo and a firm called Latino Decisions conducted a similar poll, and they had a more alarming number that like 60% of Latinos surveyed had not been contacted by a campaign or a candidate or a party. So we have a lot of work to do, and it's really important, you know, that platforms like Latina and Nancy and you, Rocio, are using your own platforms to spread the message, because if we don't vote, you know, decisions are made with or without us. And so
just to kind of, Mayra, I don't want to cut you off, but
no, you're fine.
Just to piggyback off what you said, you know, to everyone who is tuned in right now and watching, you all have a responsibility as well to use your own platforms within your own circle of influence to have these conversations, start these dialogues. And if there's something that you're not sure about, there's organizations like Latino Victory. Head over to their website, seek out information. Knowledge is power, and we cannot afford to just sit back and let everyone else make decisions for us.
Exactly. And so we're going to continue pushing candidates and campaigns to do better. But ultimately, as you said, like, these are decisions that impact our everyday life. And we are such good organizers, you know, when it comes time to, you know, organize an event for our families, when it comes time to organize, you know, ¿quién trae la birria? ¿Quién trae las tortillas? ¿Quién trae la sangría? Like, we're such good organizers. We need to apply that mentality. And we do, right? We apply that mentality to turning out the vote. And so, yes, we want our candidates to do better, but at the same time, like, if we vote or if we don't vote, decisions are made. And so we need to make sure that we're using our voice, because again, 32 million eligible Latino voters. So it really, like, we have the power to not just swing elections and swing these battleground states, but to make sure that the things we care about are being discussed once candidates are in office, right? It's not just enough to get them there. We got to make sure this is what we care about. Like, talk about it, address it.
Right. And to piggyback a little bit about, you know, issues we care about and making sure that we're voting and showing up so that those things are addressed. Can you kind of walk through the importance of, when we're speaking about the court, you know, with everything going on with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and how important the Supreme Court appointment is going to be, and the decisions and the laws and the rulings that are passed there? And then also, in addition, really highlighting the importance of local judges and local appointments, as those issues really are what make it up to the Supreme Court. So can you elaborate a little bit on how that works and just the importance across the board?
Yeah, so many people, like, when you get your ballot, there's a whole ton of judgeships that you can vote on. And very often these are nonpartisan positions. So many people kind of just gloss over them. But these are critical positions, because from that judgeship, you're in your local, you know, state court, we're building a pipeline of folks that then become eligible for Supreme Court appointments. And so I think part of why our Instagram keeps shutting down is that I feel like the internet is breaking right now, because my phone is like buzzing nonstop with everything. Here in DC, Trump having COVID down not too long ago because Ginsburg. But the reason why I bring that up is that your president has so much power in appointing Supreme Court justices who serve for a lifetime. And they make decisions on cases that impact, you know, generations to come. They set the precedent, and they undermine, you know, local laws if they see that they don't fall into accordance with the Constitution. We have only had women in the Supreme Court since the late 80s. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg was only the second woman appointed to the Supreme Court. The first one was Sandra Day O'Connor. She was appointed in the late 80s by Ronald Reagan.
Mm-hmm.
And the third is Sonia Sotomayor.
Yes.
Appointed, yes. First Latina, Latino, Latinx, because there's never been a Latino. And she was only appointed in 2009, right? So that means that laws that were being created or precedent that was being set that affected decisions all over this country were being made without a Latinx voice at the table.
Right.
And that's a problem, right? And I am very alarmed by how not apathetic, because I do think that the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has opened a lot of folks' eyes to the importance of court positions and judgeships in the Supreme Court. But for so long, like, you know, this is something that, you know, isn't like the sexy top of the ticket race. And so, like, what are we doing to build a pipeline of Latinx judges so that our voices are represented, you know, so that Sonia Sotomayor isn't the first and last, but that we're preparing people as in any industry, right? You all work in industries where I'm sure you're the only Latinas at the table.
Actually, yes.
Yes.
So it's like, how are we building up this pipeline to make sure that our voices are at the table in government, but also in media, in you know, the literary world, in sports, in every facet of our society. Like, we need our voices there, and we need Latina voices there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so you've talked so much about our numbers and the power within the community and why, you know, Latinos, we have to kind of get out there. But what we've seen, I think, too, maybe the last few years, is that there's such a divide, even amongst our own community, when it comes to politics, right? And so how can we begin to have positive conversations, you know, or come to the table where we're actually trying to move the conversation forward instead of being divided? And I think that that's just something that we're seeing across the nation, you know, all across the board. So I guess the question is, why do you believe there's such a divide in politics within the Latino community?
You know, I actually don't think there is that much of a divide, because I think that it feels like there is much more of a divide than there actually is.
Okay.
And I only say this because if you look at the numbers, consistently, you know, there's always like a third of Latinos that are Republican, like anywhere from a quarter to a third. And then, you know, anywhere from 75 to 70% that lean more Democratic.
Right.
So, like, big picture, you know, our community, contrary to popular belief, like, tends to lean more left. And a lot of that is because of the issues that really affect us, like healthcare. You know, Latinos have the highest rate of uninsurance. And even after the ACA, when millions of Latinos got access to healthcare, we still have such high rates of uninsurance. And we saw that exacerbated during COVID, where a lot of people in our community were, you know, in these essential worker fields that are on the front lines and getting sick and don't have access to healthcare, whether they're farm workers or domestic workers or in the service industry. So I don't actually think we're that divided. I think that there's a lot of noise. But I think fundamentally, like, if you look at past election cycles, that's the breakdown.
Right.
But I also think, you know, differences aren't bad. Latinos are not a monolith. We come from very different countries. And it varies whether you're a recent immigrant or you've been in this country, like the border crossed you.
Right.
So I think that differences can be good sometimes, right? Because we don't all come from the same countries. We don't all have the same experiences. And we say Latinos are not a monolith, and that's very true. And you know, that varies by where you're from. Like, if you're a Puerto Rican in Central Florida
Mm-hmm.
versus a Puerto Rican in Miami that moved here after Hurricane Maria versus a Puerto Rican in Philly or a New Yorker. Like,
Right.
those are very different experiences. So I don't think that the narrative, like, I think that we have more in common.
Right.
And oftentimes, like, if you look at a place, and I keep bringing up Florida because I think it's like such an interesting battleground
It is.
state. Like, if you look at a place like Florida, there are places where, like, the district might lean a certain way, whether that's Republican or Democratic. But when it's a majority Latino district, which, like, in Central and South Florida, there are a ton of, like, sometimes people will vote across party lines because a candidate speaks to them and their history and their experiences. So I do think, like, there's a lot of noise saying that, you know, that Cubans are Republican and, you know, Puerto Ricans are more progressive, or whatever narrative the media is spewing. I think the larger issue is that we don't get talked to enough. Right. So, like, we need more information so that we can make these decisions, so that we can have informed conversations. And that means that candidates, campaigns, and parties need to be reaching out to us early and consistently.
Right.
Okay, so I just want to interject here. It seems like our viewers are having a difficult time seeing the video. And so I guess we apologize. I know on our end, things seem okay. I can hear Mayra okay. I see her fine. Can you see us okay?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what's happening. Something's happening in the world right now, because I'm getting a lot of messages that a lot of Instagram lives have been really glitchy. So maybe the internet is breaking.
So it might be Instagram's fault.
So we may have to do a part 2.
Right. And because I feel like the only thing I see is, like, it's a little, like, when you talk, the reactions are, like, a little delayed. Oh no, someone said I wish I could see the video.
I know, we do.
Breaks my heart.
So listen, what we're gonna do is we are gonna save this video on the Latina page. So hopefully you'll be able to watch the playback.
Right.
Because it's an excellent conversation. And we're actually coming to the tail end of it, but we wanted to end with one last question for you. So
just 2 points really quickly. You mentioned healthcare, and I know that you so eloquently put that Latinos are so different, but yet I think what you were getting at is that a lot of the issues that affect us are the same. So what would you say, in addition to healthcare, are 2 other issues that really affect the Latino community?
Yeah. So healthcare, especially right now, is like consistently that number 1. Number 2 would be the economy, particularly, again, during COVID. We have a large number of small business owners within our community, and people forget about that. Like, the owner of the bodega or the tiendita, these are small business owners. And those are really prevalent in our families, in our communities, that are really hurting because of COVID. So that's a top rated issue. Education, for so many of us, education is that lever of opportunity to give us access. And for many of us that are, you know, children of immigrants or immigrants, we see that as the democratizing kind of agent in this country, right? My parents would always say, te pueden quitar el dinero, tu casa, todo, pero tu educación nunca te la van a quitar.
Yes.
So education is always a top rated issue. I'll add in here, because we don't talk about this enough, but climate change and climate sustainability is a huge issue that affects Latinos, especially in states like California and Florida and Arizona, where we're feeling firsthand the effects of climate change.
Right.
And people don't think, like, when you think about the climate movement, you don't think about Latinos at the forefront. But how many of you have family members that reuse that, like, takeout Tupperware or the butter?
The butter, sofrito,
that butter container has arroz.
Yes.
So we are conservationists. Just because we don't use those words doesn't mean that we don't partake in this movement of taking care of our planet. So I would say those are, you know, the top 3, and climate change is, like, within the top 5. And thanks to the young people, the young Black and brown people that have been pushing so that we talk about climate change. And it does become one of the top 3 issues.
So lastly, before we let you go, how can we get our communities more engaged in the political process? Like, what organizations would you recommend for them to connect with?
So one, shameless plug, follow us at Latino Victory US. I think the biggest thing is if you are eligible to vote, you know, voting is the bare minimum this election cycle. Again, because we have the numbers and we need to show our power as a community. So if you have the power to vote, make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you make a plan to vote. And then once you've done that for yourself, reach out to 3 family members or friends and make sure that they, you know, are registered and make a plan. And to make it easier for everyone, you can text VOTO, VOTO, to 52886. And we have a website where you type in your name, your address, and we can tell you if your voter registration is up to date.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. If you can early vote, you know, there's early voting options and voting by mail, because folks shouldn't have to like worry about their health or voting. So if you don't feel comfortable voting in person because of COVID, you know, find an early voting option or vote by mail. And so we can help you navigate that.
Can you repeat where you would text VOTO to?
Yes, 52886.
52886.
The word VOTO. Got it.
Well, Mayra, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
To everyone watching, we apologize from the bottom of our hearts for all of the technical difficulties, but this is the age that we live in. This will be saved, so you can go back and watch the replay, and just make sure to stay tuned to Latina. This is the first in a series of conversations that are going to continue happening as we get closer to Election Day. You know, so make sure that if you have any questions or any topics that you want to see discussed on this platform, slide up into the DMs. Let Latina know, and they will make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much. We had a great time. Mayra, thank you for your time.
Of course.
30 days to go. I think it's about 31 days. So let's get out there. Let's vote. If you can do early voting, absentee ballot. If you're not going to be in your home state or your home address, make sure you get any paperwork in that you need to get in. And more importantly, if you can get there in person, show up early, bring your water, bring your snacks.
Bring your friends, bring your mommy, your papi, your abuela,
bring your
everybody.
Kids. I'm bringing my daughter, so she's already voted with me once before. I want her to get used to it, so make sure you bring your families, and let's be the example we need out there, guys.
Yes. Thank you, Nancy and Rocio.
Thank you
Mayra,
so
thank
much.
you.
You're amazing. Bye, guys.
Bye.